At this point, I want to call back to my second ever episode where I've talked about adapting to external change. And like I said in that episode, it's not the easiest thing, that's well known. But now I have a new perspective to offer. Adapting to change only has to be as difficult as you make it out to be. Welcome to the Sum of Everything podcast, where we discuss a little bit of a lot of topics, ranging from spirituality to finance and everything in between. I'm your host, Aishwarya, a serial hobbyist with an unquenchable thirst for learning, especially through new experiences. In this podcast, we will scratch every itch of curiosity, explore various perspectives, step out of our comfort zone, and experience some of everything. Because after all, we are just that, a sum of all our experiences. So, let's dive right in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Sum of Everything podcast. I feel really good about restarting this podcast. And after last week's episode, I even received some very interesting feedback among some really encouraging comments. One in particular stood out to me because this person told me that my voice had succeeded in putting her to sleep. And she meant this in the best way possible, by the way. Because apparently she had been struggling to sleep and my voice evidently helped her get some shut-eye. That makes me feel really good about myself. And it also makes me wonder if I should explore ASMR videos as a side hustle. What say? I'm just glad that this podcast is helping people one way or the other. Anyway, so last week I was thinking about what I can talk about for this week's episode and the subsequent episodes after this, and thinking about maybe doing something in the form of a series all through January. And in the midst of this, I was listening to one of my favorite podcasters, Haley Hoffman Smith, who has a podcast called Big Conversations. Now, if you're at all interested in rewiring the subconscious mind, talking about astrology, EFT tapping, and in general, just up-leveling yourself, this is a great podcast and I absolutely recommend it. She's one of my favorites. So anyway, I was listening to her episode titled How to Make the New Year Feel New. In fact, it was the last episode of 2024. And it seemed a little strange, right? Why would you want to make something that's already new feel newer? Why doesn't it automatically feel new? Or rather, shouldn't it just feel new? Because it is the new year, the dates change, the calendar changes. And that made me wonder. We've selected a rather arbitrary date on the calendar to celebrate as a new year, haven't we? We make resolutions, we set goals, but in reality, it's not really new from the Earth's perspective, is it? It's not a solstice. The sun isn't changing directions, or rather, the Earth hasn't changed directions with respect to the sun. Heliocentricity over here, friends. It's not a harvest-based thing, like a lot of our festivals are, or a lunar movement thing. So it's not following the lunar calendar either. And in fact, even for those who believe in astrology, the stars aren't particularly changing their positions, and they rarely align with this arbitrary change of the year. So the energies are not dramatically different either. So it feels completely random. And yet we're forced to shake up our routines and dead in the middle of winter for the Northern Hemisphere at least. We have to suddenly get used to saying and writing a new date in the year column. And I know we've all been there at least once in our life where we've scratched out the wrong year and corrected it in our books. It feels like just when you're sort of settling in to the year and getting used to what the year has in store for you, it's time to change again. But then, think about it. No one no one in the world seems to think this random change is unwelcome. Not one person I know complains that they would rather stay in the old year. I mean, sure, there are people who don't celebrate it as much as most others do, but everyone just sort of accepts it and adapts to it. At this point, I want to call back to my second ever episode where I've talked about adapting to external change. And like I said in that episode, it's not the easiest thing, that's well known. But now I have a new perspective to offer. Adapting to change only has to be as difficult as you make it out to be. Let me put it in simpler terms. This random change in date and its related newness is something I can personally equate to the numerous times in life that I've had to move homes, cities, schools, etc. because my father had a transferable job. So basically, I've been picked up from one place and put in another, regardless of my consent, much like the year changing, and expected to adapt. And mind you, this didn't happen once or twice. It happened every few years. And I think the longest period of time I've ever spent in one place is 5 years. That's 1/6 of my entire life. Of course, moving so much came with a bunch of its own issues. I've never been able to answer the question, where are you from, with ease. In fact, in college, I had such a hard time coming up with a short answer that I gave up and simply said, I'm Tamilian and I've lived all over the country. I've always been envious of people who've spent a significant portion of their life in one place because that means that they've had friends that they've known and lived next door to pretty much all their lives. But that doesn't mean that my experiences were only bad. Because over time, despite having gone through all the pain of moving constantly, of changing your school, your teachers, your friends every few years, I've learned to look at how those experiences have contributed to the strengths I have and have made me who I am today. Among all the advantages that moving has to offer, or rather moving during your childhood has to offer, the greatest one that I think I have benefited from is the ability to adjust and adapt to new places, people, and cultures, and to do it fast, and have a healthy appreciation for the diversity that is in this country. Recently, a friend of mine and I were talking about moving houses and how in a span of about 6 years in the same city, she had to move 6 times. Now that is an arduous proposition for even the most seasoned movers. During this conversation, we were talking about renting furniture versus buying furniture and how she preferred to rent because that meant she didn't have to bother selling the furniture or packing it up when she had to move, whereas I preferred to buy because it ended up being less expensive in the long run, and I didn't mind packing up my furniture in boxes when I had to move. There's someone who's seen her entire house being packed into boxes every 3 years or so. It really didn't seem that much of a task to me. But this conversation got me thinking that when it comes to moving, there are so many things that people might hesitate to do because they were simply not used to it. And that puts me in a rather unique position because I could proclaim myself to be an expert in this field, second possibly only to my mother. I have moved so much in life that I think I have cracked the code to doing it in the most effective and efficient manner. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to sit here and give you advice on how best to pack up your house and put it in boxes and how to efficiently move from one place to another. Although, if that is something that you want from me, feel free to contact me. I will give you a great many number of tips. But what I thought I could do in this episode is maybe offer a little bit of advice. on how to make the move a little less daunting and a little more palatable from a social perspective. A lot of the points that I'm going to mention here on don't just apply to when you're moving cities or countries. These are just as applicable when you're doing something as simple as starting a new college or moving schools or moving jobs. While they're easier to do as children because you're younger and less set in your ways, I would argue that these are more important for adults to keep in mind. So here goes. Number one would be, and I would argue that this is the most important point here, don't change yourself to fit in. We're all guilty of that, aren't we, at some point in our lives? Just because people that we want to be friends with have certain habits or like certain things, we force ourselves to either like it, pretend to do so, change our habits. But that defeats the very purpose of trying to make a new space your own. Because if you're changing yourself to fit into an existing environment, that means you're not being true to yourself. You will find people who like you for who you are. I promise you that. The discomfort that comes from changing yourself just so that you become more acceptable is really not worth it. And you might say, Aishwarya, that's easier said than done. Yes, you're right. It is easier said than done, but that doesn't mean I haven't done it. When I was in college, all of my friends were night owls. They would work late, they would party late, they would sleep late. I was always the first one to go to bed and obviously the first one to wake up as well. And that just confused the hell out of my friends. I was made fun of a lot. But I was also the person who woke my friends up, and I can very confidently say that most of my college friends owe their degrees to me because I woke them up enough number of times for them to get to class so they could actually write the exams instead of getting debarred for lack of attendance. No, I'm kidding. Of course, they don't owe me their degrees, but yeah. So yeah, be true to yourself. Now, number two, and I found this personally very, very helpful. Join a community of any kind. Now, this could be something like a book club or a dance class or a band. When you become a part of a community and meet regularly, you not only meet new people and make new friends, you have a sense of belonging that allows you to ease into an otherwise alien place. When I came to Bangalore 4 years ago, peak COVID time, I didn't have any friends in Bangalore. And I was alone for the better part of 2 years before I finally found myself a dance class that I wanted to join. And now the girls of that dance class, including my dance teacher, they're my community. They're my friends. I'm able to enjoy the city a lot more because of them. And I'm sure if you actually experience this, you'll know all the benefits that being a part of a community has to offer. Irrespective of how introverted you are as a person, even from an evolutionary perspective, human beings have survived largely because they banded together and formed communities. That's how important being a part of a community is for survival of the human race. So, go find the nearest book club or dance class or band or music class or pottery club and go join it. Whatever your hobby is, it's going to make your life a lot easier in that new place. Now, number three, don't be afraid to ask for help. Ask for help from the people around you, your neighbors, your colleagues, but most importantly, the admin staff, the domestic help, support staff, and security guards of any place that you go to. These are the people who generally know everything, where you can get things done, what's the nearest place to get something, how to get things done quickly. They have their networks, they have their own support system, and generally, they can help you get all of this done in the least expensive way. Make friends with them, get to know them, treat them like you would a colleague. They're usually the nicest and the most helpful people around, in my experience. Number 4, try to personalize your space in the best way you can. A mistake I see a lot of people making is that if they know that they're going to be in a place for a very short period of time, 2 months, 3 months, half a year, they don't make any efforts to personalize the space that they're in or they're using. Now, this could be a room, a desk, or just anywhere. If you don't make a space your own, you're not going to have any ties or any connection with it. And you're not going to feel like it belongs to you. And that's very important when you're in a new environment. Something that tells you that this is your safe space. Now, I know that a lot of places could have restrictions on what you can and cannot put. Maybe on walls, you can't put up posters or stickers. And I also know that when you have a room to yourself, like a PG room or a hostel room, personalizing it is a lot easier to do. Maybe you get your favorite cushions, a pretty bed sheet. Maybe you can add plushies. There's a lot you can do with a room. But what about something that's much smaller and not something that you have much creative freedom over, like an office desk? There's not much you can do with it, right? But something that is easily movable is always welcome, isn't it? For instance, if you have a desk that you know is going to be yours for a very short period of time, what can you do to make that office desk yours? You could have a few coasters, bring your own coffee mug, or bring your own calendar, or a pen stand with your favorite pens. Just anything that signifies that this is your space. Because when you feel like you need a place to belong, coming back to that space will make you feel better. It'll make you feel safe. This is something that I experienced myself, in fact. So for the first few months of my first ever job, I didn't have anything personalized at my desk. But in the beginning of 2018, I bought myself an Alicia Souza calendar, and it was such a beautiful, colorful addition to my desk. I would doodle all the things that I wanted to write, give myself motivation, encourage myself to get through the day because some days were just very, very hard. And it was such a big support to me at that time. So ever since 2018, an Alicia Souza calendar has been a constant at my work desk. It doesn't matter where I am. I have one even now and I'm looking at it. And it's the cutest, most colorful addition. And it makes me feel happy when I sit to work. So personalize your space. It'll make you want to be at that space. And it'll make your day so much better. Number 5. When you're in a new place, identify a few restaurants around that serve good food and, more importantly, good comfort food for you, whatever that may look like, that is cheap and especially something that is as close to your home cuisine as possible. Food is more important than you realize and more important than people generally give it credit for. If you're moving to a cold place especially, figure out where you get the best soups. You're going to need that on a very cold day when you don't want to cook for yourself, but you want something warm and comforting. Also, learn how to cook and learn how to whip up some very easy, quick recipes that have the least ingredients and are all one-pot dishes. So you can just throw things together in a pot and make a meal. I cannot understate the importance of learning how to cook. You cannot survive on ramen or instant noodles all the time. So learn how to cook. It's going to save your life. And finally, as exciting as it is to move to a new place and start afresh, it is important to keep in touch with your old friends or the people that you left behind. You are going to get homesick more often than not in the first few months of your move. And keeping in touch with your old friends really helps. with not just making you feel warm and comforted because you miss them, but also because you can keep yourself grounded. It serves as a reference point for how much you've grown, who you used to be, and who you have become. So these are just a few basic pieces of information that I have put together based on my experiences from all the times that I have moved. I hope it helps you if you're in a phase where you're starting something new. And if you're not, maybe pass it along to somebody who might need it. I hope this is helpful, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.